Woolbright Development, the company that I'm with. So I'm Duane Stiller. I'm the CEO and founder of Woolbright Development. We are located in Boca Raton, Florida, that's where our headquarters are. And we invest in shopping centers, not malls, but so strip shopping centers, open-air shopping centers throughout the state of Florida. And our portfolio is concentrated in the major metropolitan areas, so Miami, Dade County, Broward, Palm Beach, Orlando, Jacksonville, and Tampa. I started in business, you'll learn a little more about that later. I put my first job on as landscaper age 12. Okay, so I grew up in a family focused on real estate. My dad, in the 60s, was working for one of the largest home builders in the United States, Levitt & Sons. We moved to Florida in 1970. My dad built built the first houses in Boca Raton west of the Turnpike. Everybody thought he had absolutely lost his marbles. My mom wanted to have him committed until they realized that they sold all 500 of their houses in 12 weeks. I am born of a real estate family, and I ate, lived, and slept real estate for most of my life. I knew when I entered the engineering program at Cornell that I was going to go out and make my career in real estate. And so in my talk today, I will turn this on now. I will tell you first about Woolbright, and then I'm going to teach a course on how to invest in shopping centers. And we're going to focus today on essentially either ground-up development or buying an existing property and transforming it. So I'm going to give you all of the secret sauce that I spent learning in my entire career in this lecture. And it's good that we're recording it because you're going to have a chance to watch it many times over. The secret sauce is readily available to you. This past year, I'm relatively comfortable here in the university environment teaching because this past year I taught a course at Cornell University, which is where I graduated from, in the Masters of Real Estate program. That's a 2-year program. So I have a Cornell business card. I'm a visiting professor. I taught it with 3 other gentlemen. Richard Baker, who is part of National Realty, but is also famous for buying Lord & Taylor and the Hudson Bay Company in Canada. Bruce Solodnik, who is the CEO of Prime Outlet Centers that was recently sold to Simon. So those of you that like shopping in outlet malls, Bruce had some interesting observations, which my daughter, who took the class, particularly liked. And Richard Doobie, who has a very similar company to Woolbright in Chicago. So here we go. We're going to try to do it in 1 hour. My entire history of all my secrets on how to be a superb value-added investor. And then in the remaining time at the end of the class, I'm going to open up to questions. And what we'd like to do is just get as many questions as possible on the board and cover as broad of a range of topics as we can. So nothing that is off base for the question period. Let's and also while I'm giving this talk, feel free to raise your hand, hit the mic, and ask as many questions as you want, because if you're going to truly get all the secret sauce, you're going to you may find some nuances that you want some particular edge on. So hopefully, I stole one of these. I got to properly get it on here. Let's see. I found your USB. All right, there we go. So my favorite real estate investor is Sam Zell, and Sam Zell has a very simple strategy that I've stolen from Sam that is part of the secret sauce. And essentially, that is identify the macro trend that supports your investment strategy, and it should be an obvious one. Let me translate Sam for you for a minute. Pick something very simple, that is a surefire thing, and focus on it. Don't think too hard, because making profits in business is not too terribly difficult. Too many people overly complicated. So I'm a big fan of retail properties because everybody has to buy groceries, everybody has to get a haircut, everybody has to get their shoes fixed at some time in their life, their clothes dry cleaned, and so I like Sam's advice. Now, Woolbright's portfolio, in the past decade, we've done about $3 billion worth of projects, and 90% of the projects we have done have been transforming existing properties, and only about 10% of the projects are the things that you typically would expect a developer, a company for like Woolbright Development, to be doing. You'd expect us to be building those new Publixes, building those new Walmarts, building those new Costcos. I want you to realize that Florida's population only grows by 2% a year. The United States population grows roughly 1% a year. And that means that the capacity of real estate in Florida cannot be increased by more than 2% a year, or we're going to have excess supply. So those of you that are experiencing some pain as a result of the housing crisis, it's simply because we built way too many houses. And it takes a little while for the population to grow enough to absorb those excess houses. And in that same way, I want you to realize then that when you wake up on January 1st and you think about what are you going to do in real estate this year, that approximately 2% of the opportunities, in my opinion, live for the people that are going to build brand new stuff. And I tend to think, I like that space. Building brand new stuff can be exciting. Sam Zell often warns, though, that people that build brand new stuff can suffer from the edifice complex, meaning you're doing something that doesn't make any money, but it just feels good because you get written about in the newspaper. And I like to stick with the stuff that's already there. So 90% of what I do is transforming the stuff that's already there, because the reason I'm in business is to have fun and make money. Okay, so I don't mind not being written about in the paper, because when you make a public shopping center that's in a neighborhood a much more exciting place to go and bring in a whole series of new tenants, they don't write an article about that. But I'll teach you in a little while that that can actually be extremely profitable. Now, the other thing that I learned very on in my career was that real estate is a local business. And meaning, you know, and so much of your way of getting an edge over your competitors is going to be that you're going to have superior market knowledge over your competitors. You're going to have better relationships within the local markets, with the political leadership in order to get approvals for your projects, with the tenants that are doing business there, with the engineers, with the architects, with the contractors. And so my first job out of college was to work for Travelers Insurance, and they very stupidly assigned a 23-year-old a portfolio of 20 properties spread all over the United States, and some industrial buildings, some office buildings, and some retail projects. So they gave me both a geographically diversified portfolio and a product type diversified portfolio. And I was absolutely, completely confused. And I couldn't figure how anybody would get an edge if they had to travel all over the country and be an expert at all kinds of properties. So when I came back to start investing on my own, I decided I would be in one really good place, and I would be a complete expert on one thing, do one thing really well in that certain place. And that's how I thought I could get an edge. And so with this single-minded approach on operating in one state, in 2006, the markets have essentially frozen beginning in 2007, 2008, 2009. So if anybody comes to you and talks to you about acquisitions, you've got to go back to 2006 when the trading floor was last opened. And in 2006, you can see that when you look at the transactions that were occurring for retail properties in the major markets in Florida, Woolbright bought more properties than all the institutional investors bought combined. We bought just about half of the transactions of what all the REITs were doing combined. So we really took this local edge
and some of the other things that I'm going to teach you about in this class, and learned how to turn them into a dominant position within the market and essentially create, so there was really 4 classes of investors. There were institutional investors, private investors, REITs, and Woolbright, which is really cool if you can kind of create your own class of investor. And I'll tell you more about that. So here's the class I'm going to teach. There's just 5 things we have to learn. First, do your homework. Second, begin with the end in mind. Third, buy the right stuff. Fourth, master the execution. And fifth, follow the law of the farm. Okay? That's our class. You get through this class in this next hour, you're going to have all the secret sauce, all the stuff that I wish I knew when I was starting that position at Travelers. So rule number 1, do your homework. And this involves macro, micro conditions, and customers. So let's look. First of all, find the one person that has all the data. Okay, and I'll give you a hint. It's not CoStar, and it's not Google Earth. All right, but within every market, you want to learn about retail, please call me. I put my email on the beginning slide. You'll have it in the back. There are experts on office. There are experts on hotels. Please do not try to figure it all out without tapping into the expertise that already lives there. You want to become, but I do want you to do a lot of homework, and I want you to become an expert before you start investing money in the place. And now, the next step is once you've built your roadmap, you've talked to the experts, you've got an understanding of the lay of the battlefield, I want you to further drive around. So today, Patrick, who graduated, who came with me, who came from graduated from this program last year, we drove 50% of all the centers in Tallahassee today. We had some really good pre-data before we got there, and we learned an awful lot about how to reposition our project in Tallahassee should Publix make the decision to move across the street from where they currently are in our shopping center. And so everybody that comes to Woolbright, and my dad taught me from the first day when I was in the real estate business, he would give me things to take to other places, and all he would give me is an address. And this was pre-GPS. My dad wanted me to drive around an awful lot. I spent a lot of time being lost, but being lost allowed me to learn the markets. You cannot learn the real estate markets by looking at a computer screen. Okay? You've got to get out, you've got to drive the markets, you've got to talk to people. And so this is what I say is talk to everyone about the key projects. Okay? You will find that the leasing agent for a property, the owner of the property, the tenants in the properties, you can learn so much about the properties by simply going out and talking to people, and you will find that your information is so much more robust than if you just simply read the newspapers. And I want you to learn about recent sales, recent openings. I want you to learn about everything within that investment type that you've chosen to do. So macro knowledge, I'm a big believer in Florida. I picked Florida because 10% of the population growth in the United States happens in Florida. For the last 3 decades, Florida has led the country in job creation. And so you should realize that people are going to continue to choose to move to Florida because it's a great place to live, it has great weather, and over long periods of time, it's been one of the leading places for job growth. Historically, Florida's economy has grown twice as fast as the U.S.'s economy, and Florida has often approached about $1 trillion GDP, and that puts it on the scale of India. So you don't need to go to India to have a really large place to do business. You're already in that place. As they said in The Wizard of Oz, Dorothy, just click your heels 3 times. You've already come to the right place to be in the real estate business. So I picked, my macro research told me Florida's a great place to be, part of doing my homework. My micro studies told me that I needed to know about 100% of the projects within the market space. So I'm going to quickly take you through the kind of information that for me, doing your homework gives you. So here's a map of Palm Beach County. The 1.2 million people live in Palm Beach County. I've broken it down into 5 submarkets. And what you can see, this map, of course, is a few years old because the vacancy rates are much higher. That's not important. Obviously, there's one market here that with just a 4% vacancy, which would be much better to invest in than the market that has 7% vacancy. So one of the things I'd tell you to quickly learn as you're building your market knowledge is to begin to not think of Palm Beach County as completely homogeneous, but to realize that there are submarkets within it, and you should be investing in the places that seem to be performing the best. The other thing that I can learn from doing my research and cataloging all the projects and watching how they're performing over time is I can see where is their absorption taking place. So I'm going to define absorption as I've got a certain amount of space filled at the beginning of the year, and I have a certain amount of space filled at the end of the year. Now, if the difference between the space filled at the end of the year is greater than the space filled at the beginning of the year, I've had positive absorption. If the amount of space filled at the end of the year is less, I have negative absorption. So absorption is showing me where is the demand, where is business growth happening, where is space getting eaten up. So obviously, over a few years, if you have the market on the bottom of the screen, the yellow market, continuing to be very weak in absorption, and the market on the top end of the screen continuing to be the place that is getting most of the demand for new business growth, please do not build your project in the yellow market. Build your project in the light blue market. Now, the other thing that's going to be very important is that not every market is going to charge the same amount for rent. And so it's relatively easy for you to know with total certainty what everybody's charging for rent. Who here might offer me a strategy for finding out what are the rents that are being obtained in the market? Yes? LoopNet. Sorry? LoopNet. LoopNet. Anybody else want to give me a strategy? Yes?
Get a for-lease sign and call up the broker.
Call a broker. Either strategy is a good strategy. Pick your strategy. Again, my favorite strategy is the more people I can talk to, the better off my information is. But I think LoopNet could provide you some valuable data as well. So this data is the result of calling every public shopping center owner and asking them, if you had a 1,200-foot space to rent and you were renting to a yogurt store, what are you charging for rent? Now, the really nice thing is when you begin to see this over time, right, you can see where's the growth rates in rent happening. So you can see that not every market is growing at the same rental rate. And in this case, the Lake Worth West Palm market cumulatively had a 31% growth rate in rents, not very sustainable in a place with only 2% population growth, 2 or 3% inflation, right? You're not going to grow over a certain number of years very long at 30%. In fact, we've had rental declines as a result of this recession. But part of doing your homework will be to understand how much are people going to be paying for these projects. And this would apply if you're going to do office buildings, hotel rooms, apartment projects. Know what you're getting for rent. Now, part of my favorite thing is that you should know about what's new. You're going to do something new, or you're going to make something old look new, then you should be a total expert as part of doing your homework on what's new. And also, you should be an expert on what's proposed and under construction. And you know what? If somebody's proposing to do a project, or somebody's constructing a project, you can imagine when you call them up how excited they're going to be to tell you all about the project. Why did they do it? What is their value proposition? What are they thinking about in terms of pricing? What did they pay for this? How much profit are they going to make? They'll talk forever. Everybody wants to give you all their secrets. Little do they know that the year after, you're going to go build a competing project right across the street. So don't be afraid to go do this. Now, people say to me, gosh, Mr. Stiller, I don't know. That sounds like an awful lot of work to do. Well, I'm going to quickly take you through the entire, at the peak of the market, how much work you had to do to go do this for all the projects that were under construction in Palm Beach County. You went to Project 1, this is a Saturday. Project 2, Project 3, Project 4, Project 5, Project 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, you're done. 9 projects, you're done. I don't know, what is that? 2 Saturdays, 3 Saturdays, 4 Saturdays, you're more expert on all the new retail being constructed in Palm Beach County than the smartest guy at Principal Insurance, the smartest person at USAA Insurance, the smartest person at Pru Insurance, the smartest person at Goldman Sachs, the REIT analyst at Raymond James. None of them go out and do their homework. Now, the last thing in doing your market research is you need to know your customer. So I just put up some examples about how many stores does Publix have in the nation, in Florida, what are their expansion plans like, what do they got under, what did they open recently, what are they going to open next year, what are their strategic initiatives. Anybody want to offer me up how you might get this information? Yes. Okay, might get it from the financial statement. How else? Call them up. Hi, I'm Duane Stiller. I've just graduated from the University of Florida. I'd like to know how many stores you have, how many stores you're going to open next year. They'll tell you. Okay? Get to know these people, because when you go, the few weeks later when you go back to tell the Publix people, you know, you told me you're opening up 30 new stores, I've got a great place for you to go. Okay? Your second phone call is going to be to call me to get the capital once they say how excited they are about going there. So rule number 2, begin with the end in mind. Before we came in here to do this lecture, I met with a group of students, and they asked me a little bit about how do you figure out which projects to buy and which ones not to buy. And I said, I have a very simple go, no-go strategy. And the strategy is this. Think about it as you're investing in the stock market. You're going to buy a stock today and you're going to sell it in 2 years. If my strategy, my cutoff, my investment threshold is if I'm paying $10 for the stock today and I'm going to sell it in 2 years, I'm going to sell it for $30 to $40. I'm sorry, $13 to $14. Apologize. Sorry. So if I'm building a shopping center for $10 million, I want to be able to sell it for $13 to $14 million. If it's only going to, and when I'm doing my analysis, if I'm only going to sell it for 11 or 12, or God forbid I'm building it for 10 and I'm going to sell it for 10, then I'm just doing practice. Okay? I hate practice. Okay? We're supposed to have fun, make money. And the first rule is you better have a go, no-go strategy. When I taught my class, my first case study was the Concourse Shopping Center from the Harvard Business School, and it required everybody to do a 10-year IRR analysis, and I just puked all over this project when I took a look at it. It was $127 million of cost, and you sold it for $133 million, and you invested $40 million of cash. And I'm wondering, like, what if you don't get $137 million? What if something goes wrong, like there's a recession? Or somebody blows up the World Trade Center, or something unforeseen, like there's a flash crash in the market or something. I mean, I don't know. You know, all these things that have happened to us recently. You know, it would be ridiculous to undertake that kind of project. And yet I was surprised how many students didn't raise their hand at like the first second of class and said, you got to be nuts to even think about a project where the cost to value ratio is so close to 1 to 1, meaning there isn't any profit in it. All right, so now we're thinking for a minute about an existing shopping center and how do we take the income that's there today and make it much larger, because that's how you're going to create value. So the first thing is just fill the empty space. And our target at Woolbright is to lease 100% of the space. So many of you have been taught about shoot for your project to be 95% occupied. Get your project's occupancy to the market's occupancy. So if everybody around you is 90%, well, gosh, I guess it must be okay to have 90% of your spots filled too. We look and we say, gosh, we're 90%. There's 3 more stores here. Who can come up with an idea to put 3 more businesses in this project? Because if everybody around you is 90% leased and you're 100% leased, that last 10% of income makes you a much better investor, and you're going to continue to attract much more capital than all your peers because your projects are going to be outperforming them. And you know, if you doubt for a minute that you could lease the last 3 stores, just picture yourself being on The Apprentice, and it's the boys' team against the girls' team, and it's the team that finds the people for the last 3 stores first. I mean, convince yourself somehow to ignore what everybody else around you is doing and strive for 100%. Now, the next step, I team it managing rollovers, but I simply want you to know that eventually in your commercial projects, when someone's lease comes to an end, you're going to have to think about retaining that customer and getting them to pay, hopefully, more money than they're paying now. And how well you do at that is going to separate, is going to determine whether or not you've created more income in a relatively short period of time or not. Now, sometimes you're going to have a project where you have tired old Joe's coffee. Joe serves stale donuts. Joe pays you half the rent that you could get if you could lease this to Starbucks. And he brings in about a third of the people that you could get if you leased it to Starbucks. But Joe has 3 years left on his lease. What you need to do is pay Joe to leave. You need to create more empty space in your shopping center so you can transform its value. And that's very counterintuitive when I'm working with institutional clients and I'm like, all right, we're going to get these 5 people to go. And they're like, I thought we were creating more value here. How do we create value by getting people out of the center? Well, we create it by leasing it for much more money. I also want you to find opportunities in every project to generate more revenues by expanding it. One of the favorite things that I like to do is buy a shopping center, and you always notice that there's a whole bunch of spaces in the shop, parking spaces, that are never used. And they're always really far away from the stores. They're always way up by the road where you came in the entrance. We recently contacted Lowe's and said, gosh, that sidewalk space right by the front door, you rent it to the hot dog vendor, how much does he pay you for that? And they had some, he pays us $100 a week. We're like, well, you know those parking spots that nobody ever uses way up in the front? What if we paid you $100,000 a year to rent them from you for the next 99 years? They're like, huh. That's way more than hot dog vendors. Okay. And of course, we're thinking, good, because we're going to rent it to Bank of America to do a new bank branch for $300 grand a year, and there's a $3 million lottery ticket laying in the middle of your parking lot that you're not even aware of. When we buy our existing shopping centers, I always look for ways to restripe the parking spaces and make them a little bit smaller so I can find one of those $3 million lottery tickets sitting right there. But expansion opportunities are always there in properties where you can find ways to generate more revenues, and you have to do those well. Well, we've learned or you will learn in your classes about triple net leases, the ability to charge your tenants, in addition to their base rent, a share of the real estate taxes, a share of the insurance, and a share of the common area maintenance costs. And so often when we buy properties from investors, we find that they're really bad at doing math word problems. Okay? They look at this lease, it's 70 pages long, and they're like, oh, I don't know, we just build them what we built them last year. It's too much trouble to really do these really hard calculations. This lease was done with a different company than this company. It results in a different calculation. And so on average, in a 100,000-foot project, when we buy it, we tend to find that the prior landlord billed $1 a square foot less than they were able to bill under the lease. So it'd kind of be like your landlord or your car loan comes, the bill comes, and it's always a little bit less than you're supposed to pay. So you just pay what's on the bill. I mean, you're not going to call them back up and say, hey, my cell phone bill's too low. You didn't bill me enough money. But in fact, if you build the right thing in that 100,000-foot shopping center, that was about $1.5 million worth of value. So 30 word problems at the end of the year equals $1.5 million. How many people here have enough time to get 30 word problems right for $1.5 million? Yeah, okay, right? We have enough time for that. So these 5 things are where you're going to uncover the hidden value. Because if the prior owner saw all this opportunity, they weren't going to give it to you. You're going to look for the value that other people don't see. Now, you're going to get this go, no-go threshold right, because you're not going to do a lot of practice. And you're going to have to look at a lot of opportunities in order to find those opportunities that meet your profit criteria. And I want you to promise me that once you pick your go, no-go criteria, you're not going to let yourself or your friends or your significant other talk you into doing something just because you work so hard on that already. Okay? No. You're not going to let some overzealous acquisition guy who's on your team, who's getting paid something as a result of the number of acquisitions he does, or the broker that's selling you the property, tell you, this is the best deal in the world. You've absolutely got to do this. Okay? Real estate investing is a math problem. It's black and white. Do not move the end zone. Okay? Do not move the goalposts once you start in the game. Stick to your investment criteria and you will do very, very well. And finally, build yourself a very, very complete business plan. Plan out every single step that you're going to do. Fill these 3 spaces. They're going to cost this much money. I'm going to have them leased by this date. And buy out these 4 tenants. Get them to take this much money. Replace them with this person. Retain these tenants. Get these word problems right. So on and so forth. I want you to learn wherever you go from this program. Get to be part of a team. Start to take on a leadership role. Begin to speak. Develop your communication skills, develop your critical thinking skills, develop your listening skills, build your collaboration skills, and keep adjusting your plan. I always have a program at Woolbright where I call it the icing on the cake. Cakes are good. I like brownies a lot. They don't have much icing very often. But I'm constantly asking the team, hey, what can we put on top of this cake that would be icing? What can we do that we didn't think of in this project to make it a little bit better than when we started? And you will find, we have found so many additional opportunities that we couldn't see in that 30 or 60 days when we were evaluating the project and building our initial business plan, where there was so much more hidden value, and so we went to capture that as well. Okay. So here's my first investment 10 years ago when I went on my own. It was affectionately referred to as the Purina Dog Chow Center because of the red and white checker tiles. It looked pretty darn ugly. It had some shabby trees, so I alternate between the before and after pictures. This project we bought for $6 million. We spent $2 million on renovation. We borrowed $7.8 million from Inland Mortgage. They're still around, so you're welcome to call them. We invested $200,000, which was our a good share of the life savings of the 5 of us that had teamed up together in 2000. And within 1 year, we used those 5 value creation steps: filling the vacant space, retaining the tenants, doing the buyouts, so on and so forth. And we had created a $12 million value, $4 million of profit on our $200,000 investment in just 1 year. And as you might hope, we took that $4 million, and in the next year we went all in, right? And we continue to do that. So that's an example. Very, very. I want you to realize that anything I'm talking about today, within a relatively short period of time, all of you could be doing that. So the next rule, part of the secret sauce, is that you must buy the right stuff and you must learn to be proactive. So actually I want to go back just for a second. Most people in the real estate industry only buy things, they sit at their desk and they wait around for people to bring them opportunities, sort of like that movie Wall Street, and Michael Douglas says, hey kid, show me something I don't know. All right? But most people are waiting around for packages to come in from the various brokerage firms, and they're making their investments based on those packages. I hate that approach. Okay? You guys are learning in my class that nothing is allowed. You're not allowed to sit back and wait for people to come. You've got to go out and hunt for it. And we target using the 80-20 rule. Sort of like the way that I actually started at the beginning of the year. I would take the yearbook out in my high school days, and I would go through the various pages and circle the girls that I thought were good candidates to go to the prom with at the end of the year. Okay? Now, I didn't know them, but the 100 girls who were in my class, there were 20 circles there, and by God, I was going to get a prom date by the end of the year, come hell or high water. And there were a whole bunch of girls that were, oftentimes it was the popular girls who I had to exclude right off the bat because I knew they weren't going to go with me. But I was very, to this day, remember those maps that I showed you early on where we went and mapped out where every shopping center was? We have gone through every single shopping center in Dade County, Broward County, Palm Beach County, Orlando, Tampa, and Jacksonville, and we've decided which ones we want to take to the prom. And we go out and we go meet with every one of those owners, and we are like the dog that just won't get off your pant leg. Okay, have you ever thought about selling this property? We really love that property. Love to give you a check and take it off your hands, and tell them all kinds of great things about it. So that's it. Now, we've used technology as a tremendous lever for us to use a proactive buying system. And I'm going to tell you just briefly what we do. We not only do we map out all the centers in Google Earth and figure out who owns every one of those projects, but we can easily flip that view and look at the world from each individual owner, each individual owner's portfolio. So we want to look at Prudential Insurance and see all the projects they have. We want to look at Joe Smith, who only owns 2 projects in Florida, and see if we can convince Joe Smith to sell his projects. And we're really excited about what this means when we looked at this, because we came to realize that 70% of the properties in Florida belonged to people who had 3 or less. So there was one group, there were 30% of the people had lots of shopping centers in their portfolio, and 70% of the people had 3 or less. And we tend to focus our effort on the people that have 3 or less because this industry is going through a tremendous consolidation process. The public REITs are going to get bigger, the institutional portfolios are getting bigger, and they are going to continue to squeeze out the smaller investor who cannot operate as efficiently as the large portfolio owners. The home builders in the United States, home building business, which of course has performed pretty horribly, is really controlled by the large public home builders. So I'm not telling you that as an entrepreneur you can't go out and do 1 or 2 projects, but I am telling you that if you're going to look for opportunities within the existing property space, you're oftentimes going to find that from the owner that has very few projects in their portfolio, the smaller owner. And I add to this rule, besides using this technology-based approach, that I want you to learn to use persuasion science. So Robert Cialdini has studied persuasion. He has a number of books. Professor Cialdini is at the University of Arizona. But there is a science to selling, to buying. And there's a science to persuasion. And if you're going to be in the real estate business, you're going to have to learn to persuade an awful lot of people. And so I want you to make it a lifetime quest to continue to learn. And one of the things that I want to emphasize for you is 2 of the things, is your ability to network and your ability to persuade. And there is, I will not go into all Dr. Cialdini's research, but there is actually a right answer. Do you present the most expensive item first or the least expensive item, and so on. There's a science to how you should persuade people. We are in the age of technology and in the information age, and so I want you to spend some time and learn about that. So one of my favorite spots, Kendall, Florida. The projects in red are the projects that we worked on in the last few years. So this is essentially a 3-mile drive. At the bottom of the screen, let's see if this project is now a 400,000-foot Costco, TJ Maxx, Home Goods, Ross Dress for Less. There is the Miami Children's Hospital has 40,000 feet here. The University of Phoenix has a 20,000-foot facility. And there's a whole host of additional retailers and banks. We bought this project from Dr. London, who was affectionately called Dr. No, because it took about 30 years to convince him to sell the land. In fact, we never convinced him. He died, and we convinced his kids to sell this tomato field. But how did we convince the kids? We called this project London Square. We named it after Dr. London. They were so happy. We beat Walmart out for this land acquisition. We went up the street, and my daughter said, "Thank God, Dad, you didn't do this in our neighborhood," but we knocked down the Don Carter bowling lanes and built a shopping center there that sold for the record price of $650 a square foot. We did not knock down the bowling alley in Boca Raton where my daughter was going to high school. and they're still waiting to find an appropriate investment opportunity for that. We moved the Costco from here to this project because they were doing $1,200 a foot in sales, the equivalent of what 7 Publixes would be doing. And they needed more space. They're the most southern Costco in the United States, and today in their new facility, they are the #1 selling Costco store in the state of Florida. So we took the old Costco building because we said, all right, if we're giving you this new space up the street, you have to sell us your old space. And we turned around and we sold it to Lowe's Home Improvements for $7 million more than we bought it from Costco that afternoon. So that was a nice transaction. This project we bought from a company that owned just 1 shopping center and about 100 industrial projects. That was one of those fill it up, fix it up, sell it for 140% of our cost. So being proactive, going out, hunting for the projects, picking on the things that you want to own, sticking to your rule. I just can show you that in that area, we exploit that very seriously. So rule number 4 is business is going to be all about how well you execute. And I studied operations research and information engineering at Cornell, which is a very business systems thinking type approach. So many of the things that we do at Woolbright are not only technology driven, but we look at the business processes and we constantly ask ourselves, how can we get tenants open faster? How can we lease this space more quickly for higher rent? How can we be better at buying properties? What's the best mix of tenants to use? Can we use technology to decide which tenants to contact that have a hole in this area, they're not serving this market well? And so whatever processes you're going to work on, I want you to do them, always make it the goal to outperform the competitors that are in that marketplace. So if the projects that are nearby you are 90% leased, I want you to learn to be 91 or 92 or 100% leased. If it's taking the people near you 6 months to get people open for business, I want you to figure out how to get it done in 5 months. And you're so much more creative and at the stage of your life that you can question everything. And too often in business what happens is everybody gets out into the world and they simply try to copy what everybody else is doing. And they stop trying to innovate and be more creative than the person next to them. And I want you to question how everybody in this industry is doing what they're doing now. I'll give you just one simple example of, we just hired a graduate, Enrique Coffer, from this Masters of Real Estate program here, and we said, Enrique, your job is to do something that no one has ever done or that we don't really think any company does well or even does at all in the shopping center industry. Your job is to, from the landlord standpoint, help tenants sell more than they're selling today. Now, you have to think about that for a minute. That seems like such an obvious thing for a landlord to do that's concerned about optimizing the value of a shopping center. If you grow the sales of the tenants in your shopping center, they'll be able to pay more rent. If they can pay more rent, you have a project that's worth more money. And in fact, if your tenants are selling more than the tenants are selling across the street, and your projects are generating more profit than the shopping center across the street, you're going to be the next Donald Trump very quickly. So Enrique is now developing processes that we can use to help the small businesses in our shopping centers sell more. And now we're going to work with Publix and Kohl's to work on initiatives to help them grow their sales. And so picture for a minute that one of your tenants is a shoe repair store or an alteration shop. And you can imagine how large the average alteration shop IT department is. Okay? So they're not very good at search engine optimization. I know the last time I split my pants, I needed to quickly find an alterations place nearby. I took out my handy iPhone 4, Googled, alterations, hit my current location, was able to quickly get over there. No, I'm kidding you. I haven't had pants splitting issues in a while, but we actually are helping all of our tenants with their internet strategies because more and more people are using the internet to locate businesses. We've offered them guys in chicken suits out front, fix your split pants here, put them right along the busy road. Cross promotions where The dry cleaners provides coupons for you to get alterations done at the alteration store next door, and just on and on and on. And you know, you, just like Enrique, you know so many things that could be done to transform business that nobody's doing right now, that no matter where you go to find a job after graduation, you should offer up those bold ideas, because just because nobody's doing it now doesn't mean that it isn't something that should be done. And that you couldn't, and just because they're not doing it now doesn't mean that the industry, you know, shouldn't be transformed. And if you can create value in that way, and continue to think in that way about being innovative throughout your career, I think you're going to be extremely successful. And so some of our processes: learn to lease the last 20% of space, create the fastest openings, get really good at forecasting profits. That was a question I was asked about earlier today. We've continued to look for the most optimal capital structure and how the best way to raise capital from investors. So part of Rule 4. Also, you're going to be entrepreneurs. You're going to go out in the real estate industry. You're going to have to get the culture right. You're going to start a company. You're going to lead a company. You need to create an organization where change and creativity are required. Okay? Everybody's going to want to stay stuck and not do things any different tomorrow than they did today. And you're going to have to provide that leadership, that vision. You're going to have to select. You're going to have to learn to hire really well. And unfortunately, you're going to have to learn occasionally to fire really well. And so, you know, get the right people on your bus, in your team. Get them in the right seats. And in fact, if you have some of the wrong people on your team, get them off your bus. Okay, that's okay. You're really doing them a favor too. And I just can't say it enough. You know, leverage technology, leverage technology. I'm in my iPhone right here. I'm walking around. The folks at Publix were just absolutely floored yesterday. I could bring up in my iPhone every shopping center in the major metros of Florida over 50,000 feet. I could tap on it, show them exactly how it's performing right now, who was leasing it, click on the web page for that shopping center, and so on and so forth. They just like, how you do that? Use technology is a wonderful tool. You guys have been exposed to technology since very young age. Learn to use it in the real estate industry. The real estate industry is in the Stone Ages with respect to technology. And I want you to learn about that. So, rule number 5. You know, there's a law of the farm. People are like, Duane, are you absolutely nuts? What's the law of the farm? Never heard of that law. Anybody heard of the law of the farm? So I bought it from Stephen Covey, right? So, anybody here a farmer or have a garden? No, but anybody, come on, has anybody ever grown a garden? I planted some plants, do lettuce or something? You've done it, okay. Any shortcuts in farming? Yeah, fertilizer, about it, right? You know, yeah, that's the bad news, right? There's just no shortcuts in life. There's no way to skip, you know, weeding out the field and hoeing the stuff, planting the seeds. Oh gosh, we skipped seed planting on our farm, you know, okay? Fertilizing, watering the plants. Like the law of the farm it's pretty clear cut what you're going to have to do to be successful. And essentially, if you're going to be in the real estate industry, you have to recognize that you're not going to be Sergey Brin and Larry Page and make $1 billion your second year out of the program. Okay? You need to gain a lot of experience. You need to build your network. You need to grow. You need to make a lot of mistakes. You need to be challenged. You need to learn this technology, learn the thing. And it's going to take you a relatively long period of time. So, age 12, landscaper. I love my dad. He'd hand me a list like fertilize all grassy areas. There's 100 houses around there. It'd take me forever. It's just like child labor laws, right? Mulch all beds. Fix all sprinkler heads. Okay, that was my first job. By the time I was 17, I knew I wanted to stay away from my dad when summers rolled around. So I figured, what's the easiest thing you could do in the construction business? I'll be a surveyor. Okay, let me tell you, it's actually a relatively lousy thing to do because where you survey, there are no shade trees in August anywhere. And when I come home, my mom would be like, "What happened to your skin? You have no skin on your nose anymore." But it was really not too bad. The guys on my surveying crew learned fairly quickly that I had this complete fear of spiders. So inevitably, when I was underneath the transom holding the measuring tape, they would take some sawgrass and tell me that there was the biggest spider they had ever seen crawling down my back, which is not to move for a minute because they had to just finish this one measurement. Or they would send me out into the ponds filled with gators and all kinds of spiders hanging from the trees and stuff to figure out the depth of the pond. So actually surveying is a relatively lousy summer job. So I decided by the time I was 18 and starting in my freshman year that I was going to get my real estate sales license. I was good at test taking, which allowed me after 1 year experience to get my broker's license. I quickly moved on to getting my general contractor's license because I had supervised so many of my dad's construction projects that I met all the prerequisite experience in order to sit for the exam. And I was really good at taking tests, but to this day, would have no earthly idea how to build a 50-story building, even though I have all the requisite licenses in order to do that. And of course, by the time I was 22 and had done a lot of experience in leasing my dad's projects, very early on back in that landscaping phase and through the period I was 22, I got really good at pressure washing stuff. So eventually, 4-story buildings, my dad paid me $2,000 on a weekend to pressure clean all 4 floors. Which is really good unless you're doing it with your little brother who's going to shoot your ear off at 4 stories up with his pressure cleaner. So I still have my ear barely. So I did a lot of things by the time I was 22 and a lot of grunt work. By the time I was 23, I got married because I needed to have some stability in my life. So I married my college sweetheart who is... She's the love of my life, an architect. She's on the board of trustees at Cornell now and keeps me out of trouble. She's my moral support and is always there. And of course, she got married to me and she realized that I loved computers. And so over 6 weeks, I wrote a computer program to do the first program that ever did property management software, accounting on a PC. So in 1984, PC came out. My dad couldn't afford a PC. I couldn't afford a mini computer, which is all the packaged accounting software programs for property management ran on. So I said, "Don't worry, Dad, I'll just write you the AP, the AR, the GL, all the reporting software." And so the people from Travelers Insurance contacted my dad and said, "How come your accounting reports are done on the 3rd day after every month?" And I'm like, "Oh gosh, Dad, is that too late? Should we have it done on the 2nd day? I mean, I could tweak the software a little bit." And they said, "That is unbelievable. It takes people 4 weeks to get this stuff done." And so they bought my accounting software from me for $50,000. Do well in your accounting classes because I only had one accounting class in life, but man, I needed that $50,000 when I was 23. And so they hired me. They said, "Wow, you guys are really good at writing software. You should be good at running properties too. Look at all that experience, age 12, landscaper." Right? And so they gave me $1 billion portfolio to run. Little did they know I had no earthly idea what I was doing, so I was constantly calling my dad going, "Hey, what did you do in this instance? What did you do in that instance?" And it actually worked out really well. So my dad called me up 2 years later and told me I was wasting my time working in New York City for Travelers Insurance, that I needed to come back to Florida because he was building 3 public centers. This is 1987. Does anybody know from the history books, so it took 87, 88, and 89 to finish these public centers. Anybody remember what happened in the late 80s in the United States?
Reform Act.
Sorry?
The Tax Reform Act.
Tax Reform Act and
The savings and loan.
the savings and loan crisis. We had the same crisis. Banks are collapsing left and right. The RTC gets taken over. 800 banks fail. Credit is not available anywhere. And in fact, it was much worse if you're in the shopping center business because in 1987, we increased the supply of shopping center space by 15%. In 1988, we increased it by 15%. And in 1989, we increased it by 15%. So we increased the supply of shopping center space by 45% in 3 years, while the population grew by 6%. Okay, so that's like having flip-flops to sell in a snowstorm. All right, it's just not the product anybody wants, and in fact, it overwhelms the marketplace. And isn't that interesting that I don't know everyone's age in this room, but when I was 25, the economic train wreck that hit the United States in 1990 was as severe as this economic crisis was, and took the real estate markets 5 to 6 years to recover. And to be really great in the real estate business, you can't be just good at driving a car fast in the straightaways. You've got to be able to steer through the curves. All right? And this market right now is not, many people will say, oh gosh, it's so much harder to find a job. Oh, it's so much harder to lease the spaces than it was just a few years ago. My friend that graduated made a ton of money in the real estate business. Oh, it's hard. Thank God. Thank God. Because you're going to learn right off the bat on how to steer the curves. Okay? You can do the straightaways later. The straightaways always follow. If you graph the S&P 500 stock index from when I was born in 1961, it looks like a ski slope. It goes straight up. Okay? If you graph the GDP of the United States since I was born, straight up. Okay? You don't see these little blips. So when you look at a long enough aperture, okay, I got a pretty good idea what's going to happen to the United States over the next 40 years. It's going to be just like the last 40 years. It's going straight up. Okay? So you are entering the market at a great time, and you've got a career that doesn't run for just the next 10 months, which is all anybody writes for the newspapers or talks on CNBC is ever talking about. You have a career that's going to span the next 40 years. And the next 10 years are going to be a really important part of your career because that's where you're going to get to learn. So by the time I was 28, and the only thing that there was to do was work for the banks and help them deal with all these foreclosed properties they had. So I became a court-appointed receiver and managed and leased a lot of properties. By the time I was 29, I saw these banks were selling these properties for 30 cents on the dollar, and I said, gosh, this is Florida. It grew from 3 million people back when Kennedy Space Center opened to, you know, at that time, 12 million people. I got a pretty good idea that's going to keep growing. There's no way that someone is going to build a new shopping center if it's going to cost them $1 and they can only sell it for 30 cents. Nobody's going to build a new shopping center until you can sell it for $1. So if I can buy a whole bunch of these for 30 cents, I'm going to be the next, you know, Wayne Huizinga, who was launching Blockbuster at that time. And so I got the phone book out and I started calling everybody I could think of to raise money to just buy one project. And it took me 3 years of phone calls before I could get these 2 Canadian guys to buy these 2 properties that we had put under contract, 2 Publix anchored centers, one in Ormond Beach, Florida, and one in Tequesta, Florida. Travelers Insurance was selling them. How great was that? I had worked there just a few years ago. So they were selling them. They were going to finance whoever bought them, put up 80% of the money, just take them off their hands. They would lend you most of the money to do that. And these 2 Canadian investors, one of whom was John Daniels that started Cadillac Fairview, agreed to back this 30-year-old guy in his first project. Now, I had a wonderful gentleman who worked with me at the time, Dennis Beaulieu, who was 20 years older than me, and I said, Dennis, I'm the brains, you're the face, okay? So talk to Dennis. So that worked out great, and after working with those folks for 7 years, I learned a whole bunch more about the business than just leasing, managing, and operating properties. I learned about debt. I learned about raising capital. I learned about buying stuff and selling stuff. And so that was when I got to 38. I was able to go buy my first project on my own, that Purina Dog Chow Center. And then in the 6 or 7 years following that, I was able to do actually another $1 billion by the time I was 44, $3 billion by the time I was 47. And so, you know, this is the news of the law of the farm. Okay? It can be done, but there's no shortcuts. So secondly, part of the law of the farm is that I want you to be lifetime learners. And I want you to have very specific goals. And I want you to write down the date at which you're going to complete them. And in addition, The average person between the TV and the internet spends about 4.5 hours a day. I want you to turn that off or limit that. And I want you to shift to reading books and not the papers so much, because anybody here recently spent some time reading a 3-week-old or 3-month-old newspaper? And nobody would do it. Like, forget it, right? But anybody pick up a book that was written 100 years ago, 20 years ago, okay? Something written by Plato, Aristotle, Machiavelli's The Prince. We can go on and on, right? So begin to spend less time with the papers and more time with books and things that or information that will matter 3, 5, 10 years from now. I also like my OneNote notebook. I'm constantly cutting and pasting information that I think matters, and I keep information organized so that I can go back and learn from it. I also recommend that you develop a habit of studying entrepreneurs, leaders, thinkers. I think I read every biography I could find on an entrepreneur. Fred Smith starting American Express, Ray Kroc starting McDonald's at age 57, and so on and so forth. There are so many struggles that these people went through that knowing about the hardship that Bill Gates had, when he's sleeping in the back of a car in Phoenix, Arizona, it really helps you when you're going to face the various struggles in your life. Lots of information now on the web, lectures. I told John Doerr, who's one of the greatest venture capitalists in the country. I go every year to the TED conference in California, and I told John Doerr that I watch all of his lectures that he ever gives at Stanford, and I've stolen all the good ideas that he has. And he's like, Duane, here's my business card. Feel free to call me anytime. You can have every idea that I have. And there is just a wealth of information of great thinkers, great leaders on the internet, and I want you to find those places and spend time. I give you just a few books that I really liked, but in my life, and if you want to email me and have me send you an expanded reading list, I'm happy to share that with you. One of the greatest books I read was a book by Mortimer Adler, who was the founding publisher of the Encyclopedia Britannica. And he wrote a book on how to read a book. And it starts out and says, you've been taught to do a lot of things in life. You've never been taught how to read a book, to really take the messages from the author that's there. And I think it's still in print. It was a book that changed my life and made me a lifetime learner. I talked earlier about The Law of the Farm. I like Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. There's a book written by Fisher called The Instant Millionaire. I think it's not about being a millionaire overnight, but I think it's largely about having the vision to believe that you can do things that a lot of other people are going to tell you can't do, and about how to establish goals to get there. And oftentimes, Machiavelli, the prince, so many people look at that as, oh, that's terrible. The ends, the ends justify the means. But so many of Machiavelli's ideas, where he's trying to help the Medici defend their new principality and learn from history. When you're an entrepreneur, there's going to be a lot of people out there that want to knock you off. Okay. And this recession taught me that more than ever. There will be a lot of things that you're going to learn in tough times, and you're going to have to learn to become more tough yourself over time in business. Not that it doesn't mean you can't be compassionate, not that it doesn't mean you're going to create a great culture, but Machiavelli had some great advice for the Medicis. They never gave him his old job back. He had supported the wrong guys, so he wrote this advice to them in order to secure that. But I like that, as well as write down your goals. So this is the sort of the plan part of the secret sauce, right? You got it in 5 simple rules. You follow these 5 rules, and you will be one of the greatest investors ever. So if someone can help me just raise the screen, I'd like to use the time we have left, about a half an hour, for questions. Now, questions are easy. Again, I borrowed this from John Doerr. You have to be able to deliver them in one breath, and they end with a question mark. All right, so when you ask your question, if you can start out by stating your name and give me your question. what I'd like to do is get as many questions up here as we can. We'll get about 15 or 20 questions up here, and then we'll attack them. Please do not criticize my spelling. I absolutely cannot spell. Okay. I'm left-handed. I do a lot of good things good, but I do a lot of things very badly. Spelling is one of them. Math problems I'm good at, though, by the way. So do we have some questions? Yes.
How has Florida comprehensive planning affected your ability to renovate your buildings?
Okay, so the question is, how does Florida's planning affect, comprehensive planning affect your ability to renovate and manage buildings? Let's ask it a little bit more broadly. How does government impact our ability to succeed in the real estate business, right? So, government regulations, right? Talk a little bit about government regulations. Some other questions? Come on, you guys have questions. Yes.
So you said that it's really important to hire the right kind of people. What kind of qualities do you look for?
That's a great question. Okay, so hire the qualities. Yes.
How did you meet your partners on your first
Yeah. So we're gonna expand this. How do we find capital, right? And how do we find it for the first time? Okay. So capital. How do we find it? Wow, we got 30 minutes. So we're gonna need a lot of questions. Yes.
I'm new to Gainesville.
Yes.
I see this market. I see lots of opportunities and lots of weaknesses. How do I start investing? Well, you have the rules, but okay, after learning it, it seems that everything is not working.
Okay. So great question. How do we start? How do we start? Yes.
How much site analysis do you use? I know you drive around a lot, but I'm sure there must be a component of that you put in, like the STAV, things like that. Those are mortgages.
Yes. So, okay. A little bit about data, right? How are we going to use data effectively for? Yes.
How have you been able to retain tenants in the current reception?
Oh, that is a great question. Okay, so retain tenants. We actually have an acronym for that I'm going to talk about called FOSTER. And I'll tell you a little bit about the rest of the acronym. Yes, you had a question.
How do you approach major anchor tenants when you think about a new piece of land?
So how do we target anchors? And how do we approach them? I can tell you a lot about that.
Can you tell us about some times when Woolbright or your team might have not succeeded at a project and why that was and what you learned from it?
Yes. So, failure. We're getting better. These are getting better questions.
What are some of the most valuable personal connections you've made over the years?
Yeah. I know, spelled wrong or whatever, but no penalties. Come on. Okay.
Sure, push your own left.
Mike, go ahead.
Just how big a problem do you think there is with, commercial real estate loans or with asset-backed securities? That hasn't really come out yet. It's like there's another shoe waiting there to drop, and
Okay.
what kind of opportunities does that
So this is how do we deleverage? How do we deleverage the system? Okay, because we're going to talk about deleverage, capital issues. Yes.
What are your tips for networking and then maintaining those relationships you build?
So these were, how do I get personal connections? Who are the most important ones? And how do we network? Okay. Anybody want to know about jobs? Where are the jobs? Okay, let's put that up there too. Let's see. Where's the jobs going to be? What should I angle for? Okay, so let me start on a few of these questions. First question is, how do you deal with government regulation? Has government regulation been tough? The answer is government regulations, since I was starting out in the business when I was first helping my dad open tenants in those office buildings when I was 18, to today, have tripled the time it takes to get a tenant open for business. All right? And that applies to just about everything. And what you need to realize is that as much as I told you the vector of change was that the future was always going to be better than the past, okay? And that has been true for everything that we can look at throughout the development of our society. The same is true for government impeding your ability to do business, okay? That vector is just going to get harder and harder and harder, and you have to accept that as being just one of the things that you're going to have to learn to deal with. I have a secret weapon in getting so many things approved. And I don't know if you realize, but if you want to put a daycare center into a community, you have to go, almost without question, every municipality in the state of Florida and get a special zoning exception. Okay? Put a daycare center in. I didn't know daycare centers were such a big threat to humanity that we needed to do a 6-month-long process to get them before we could even start processing the plans. And so my secret weapon is my dad. Okay? He's 70 years old, 72 years old. He knows every government official. He's brought more donuts to more, building department desks in his life. He has met with every politician, but today's politicians tend to been yesterday's assistant to the leader. And it's funny because when my dad goes in, some of the city or county commissioners will say, "Don, I bet you have more grandkids than you do." Okay, so there's this personal relationship that gets built but with these government officials over time, and there begins to be a trust. Okay? These are people, right? The rule book is getting bigger, okay? And they're just doing their job. They're sticking to the rule book. And if you're going to succeed in real estate, you're going to have to develop a skill to understand those rules, develop a connection with the right consultants, and develop a personal relationship with the leadership and your ability to sell those leaders on these projects. My dad has pretty much rewritten just about every rule known to mankind by just providing reasonable logic and presentations for which the politicians get behind. I'll give you one example. We're putting a combination bowling alley and movie theater into a shopping center that also has a health club. And so those are pretty intense uses for parking. And if we went strictly by the code book, we probably needed twice as many parking spaces as we would have otherwise had. But it turns out that the time when the movie theater is busy is exactly the opposite time when the health club was busy. And so my dad was able to show through a number of studies of when usage would occur that this parking lot would always function, would be more than adequate to serve these businesses. So he did what was called a shared parking study. And he showed that, in Dade County they had adopted this approach. My dad was dealing in Broward County, and so he demonstrated precedent for going with that. And it was relatively easy for my dad to get buy-in and get the government officials to go along with that. So government regulation is just part of this business. It doesn't matter whether it's comprehensive planning, this, that. It's always going to get harder and harder and harder, and that's okay. Because you're going to get smarter and smarter and smarter, and you're going to be collaborative, and you're going to use the right people, and you're going to work through that. Question was, how do you retain tenants? So when you lead a company, you've got to put a very clear vision out in front of your employees. And so for the last 2 years, our vision has been simple at Woolbright with respect to our business model. It's getting the 3 F's right. Okay, so it was finish, get all the tenants that we had signed leases with open for business, fill, get every space that doesn't have a tenant in it, find a business that can go there, and foster. Nurture the businesses that we have and provide them the assistance, whether it's rent relief, marketing assistance, or simply just giving them hope. Going in and coaching them and telling them, about, come on guys, you've got this alteration shop and there's got to be people that need to alter their stuff, and you can improve your business by $50 a day, and if you can do that, that's $1,500 a month, and you're only short $500 a month in the rent. You can do it, and you would be amazed how much this helped. And so your question was, how did we retain tenants? We trained our property managers, and we also hired outside experts in growing sales. And so we got the tenants to stop focusing on how to cut their bottom, how to cut expenses, and instead got them to focus on how to grow their sales. And I was also willing to, if we felt the business was viable, take half the rent, a third of the rent, whatever I felt was fair for them to pay in order to help them get through these times. And you probably read that there were a lot of businesses out there, particularly a lot of public companies. I listened on those quarterly conference calls, because remember I told you that everybody likes to talk a little too much, that absolutely had the line, if we got called by anybody for rent relief, we weren't going to help them at all. Right? And that seemed to me too binary, too on and off. And I think to solve problems in the world, you really have to have more of a dimmer switch. You have to have some flexibility about how you deal with things. And I'm going to tell you that if you go to one of our shopping centers today, and given how we dealt with those tenants in this crisis, they all say, we love being in a Woolbright center. These guys are the greatest company to work with. And imagine how great that is to have a group of fans, businesses that are going to advocate for you during this upturn that we'll experience over the next 7, 10, 15 years. So fostering is an absolutely critical part of your business model. Remember, so many landlords probably don't even know the names of their tenants. As you build your business, build a relationship with your customers. And if you build a great relationship with your customers, you're going to do exceedingly well in real estate. How do you target anchor tenants? That's a great question. Anson Lin, an engineer from Cornell University, senior engineering operations research, came down to work on that project over the summer. Anson's first job was to figure out where every anchor was located today. And it didn't just stop at anchors. He had to figure out where every Starbucks was, every Subway, every Dunkin' Donuts, every Supercuts, every Quiznos, everybody. We had actually 400 retailers that operated 10 or more stores in Florida. Anybody got an idea where Anson got that data from? Sorry? Yeah, actually, it was horrible, Anson. Every idea he had there was no good place to get the data from. The best place, for most instances, to get the data from is actually to build crawlers at the websites of the companies, and that put half the IT team working on that. It's a really, really hard problem. Once you have all the data, once you can geocode everybody's location, you don't get it from Dun & Bradstreet, you don't get it from CoStar. Google has 70% of people's stuff, so don't try to do it from Google either. But once you have all that data, it's relatively easy to figure out who is missing a store. Well, first of all, it's relatively easy to figure out the distance, the minimum distance that they tend to put between two of their stores. All right? That's pretty easy to figure out. Get an awful lot of stores. Anson sorted them all. Anson actually threw out the closest 10%. He said too often they were across the street from another. There was anomalies, so my system broke. So he took the 90%, the 90th thing, so think about the median is in the halfway point. Anson's point was 90%. I'm giving away all Anson's secret sauce. He won't mind. It took him all summer to do this. So you then can easily build an algorithm that will tell you, if you know where all the stores are, and I have this proposed site right here, okay, is this location is this location a hole within the network that retailer has? Now, remember, we were doing this across the whole state of Florida. Why did we do this? 400 retail companies. At any given time, we have about 30 projects. We want our leasing agents to go call the most appropriate people to market to. It doesn't do any good if you call the Subway guy up when he has a Subway store right across the street. Your leasing team's going to waste a lot of time if they don't have a good way to target who to call. Leasing agents, we found, were only calling 1/3 of the 400 companies. Anybody want to guess why they tended to call only 1/3? They tended to call the people they liked, people they already knew. Okay, so 2/3 of the companies were never getting called because they didn't know that guy at Dunkin' Donuts. So that's a hard call to make. But I know the guy at Subway, even though he's across the street already, but I'd like to talk with him. So we felt, if any of you guys get called by NASA, get offered the opportunity to steer a spaceship to Mars, please turn down the job. That's far better to be done by computers than by any one of you in this room. There's too many calculations to get there right, with Mars spinning one speed, you're spinning at a completely another speed. You don't want to aim for Mars in a straight line. That's pretty problematic. And in this way, there's lots of problems like this. Okay, how should you target anchors, which are best answered by computers and not leasing agents. Now, with that being said, you can easily display locations in Google Earth, and you could really easily decide who has a hole nearby. So Patrick and I just went to Tallahassee. It was, it wouldn't take you very long to figure out where the places where Lowe's is missing locations, where are some of the places that Home Depot's missing locations, today we were looking for where's a good place to locate a new sporting goods store that's a big chain that's coming in out of Texas, and so on. So I don't want to tell you that, using a mathematical algorithm is the only way to do this, but in fact, it's just very data-centric. Now, the second part is we have to build a personal relationship with those retailers, and we have to, come to them with very good ideas, and we have to get their feedback so we can continue to refine our approaches. So you might find, well, gosh, Duane, Anson's algorithm only considered distance. It didn't consider things like the demographic conditions in this spot as compared to these other two spots. It didn't consider income levels, it didn't consider education levels, and so on and so forth. 5 students from Cornell's Master of Engineering program did as their semester research project. They looked at 50 different variables for Publix, Walmart, Lowe's, Target, Home Depot, Office Depot, and Staples, and they found that running regression models, reverse regression models, that there were only 2 demographic characteristics that were correlated in general with these guys. So it turns out that we learned that distance actually is really the most important thing. I'm not going to tell you the 2 things that are correlated because one is a total population. It just seems pretty logical, right, that there's having enough people around to support the store. You can do that you don't need an algorithm for that. Just look at the Google Earth. And so I won't give you the second one because I was a little disappointed about the second one and what it says about the way people pick locations. How do you hire quality people? That is really tough. Because so often you really don't get to learn what makes a person, you don't learn enough about a person until you're actually working with them to know if they're going to work really well. We have, you've got to develop very good questions. You've got to listen to those questions. You've got to quit talking when you go to hire people. What do you want to look for when you hire people? I think that you want to look for people that listen well and who actively listen and who then can respond with creative ideas or responses. Secondly, you want to hire people that are demonstrated to be lifetime learners. Third, you want to hire people who communicate really well, and communicating well means they can work well in teams, they can defend their ideas, They can collaborate with others and share ideas. They can motivate people when they have a great idea. And in fact, they can lead. So you want great communication skills. And in fact, another reoccurring theme is you want to hire people that are great at networking, because so many of the areas involve direct, whether you're getting government approvals, whether you're working with the contractors, whether you're working with recruiting these various tenants, whether you're trying to buy shopping centers from that. Remember, I'm trying to get that date to the prom. So I think you want to look at for people that have certain qualities that you've determined that fit well with your culture and that are important to your business success. Talk about a failure. Well, now failures were kind of easy when real estate prices are going to crash by some 30 or 40%, and banks are going to fail. Some banks are going to fail, or at least the credit markets are going to completely stop working. And I think that a project that I like to think a little bit about was we bought from a small investor a Publix anchored center in Stewart, and I stopped listening to my rule about the 130% growth over 2 years, and I started to get sloppy, and so I said, gosh. The acquisition guy said, well, this one will be 115%. But God, we've made so much profit over the last few years. Why can't we reduce down and accept 115%? Well, so I compromised my go-no-go strategy, and sure enough, I didn't leave enough capacity, enough safety in that investment. So when the rent started to go down and the costs for the project inevitably came in at much higher than we expected, because you often tend to underestimate your costs. That project became definitely practice. And so I want to remind you not to deviate when you build that threshold, go, no go. Even though it's getting close to the prom, don't compromise and say yes to a bad date, stay home. And that's where I failed. I remember most recent failure. I think the question here was, what are some of the most important personal connections you have? And I think that some of the most important personal connections are really my family, who consistently supports me. And I think that's critical, because for us, family comes first. Okay, so have fun, make money, family first. Also, I went out, and when the business was at its peak, I asked a gentleman whose family owns the Empire State Building, is there one thing that you do differently than everybody else does? And they said, yeah, Jim Kachalka. Like, Jim Kachalka? It turns out he was an industrial psychologist. He was a personal coach. And he's just been a great mentor and a great advisor. And so, one of the most important personal connections you can have will be great mentors. And so, there are so many alumni from this program. There are many people within the industry that will be happy to mentor you. There are many Jim Kachalkas out in the world. And you need to build, they don't have to be, Jim Kachalka is not a real estate expert. In fact, he doesn't know anything at all about real estate. But he's been a wonderful advisor throughout this. And I think having the right mix of advisors have been some of the most important personal connections that I've had. And there are many people like Jim in my life that there are only a few people you encounter in your life. I have more than one, and they're some of the most critical personal connections. How do you network? One of the most important things to networking is of course, making a list of people that you want to get to meet, and taking the initiative to contacting them and meeting people. And I think one of the most important things into doing that is to, in fact, just start. Okay? So if you're going to procrastinate, because you're going to hate to network, you've got at least a year left in this program. Some of you may be in a program that's 2 years. I want you to have at least one business card a week. So the next year I want you to have a network of, pull up, and Duane, I got 50 business cards next time you come back. If you're here for 2 years, I told the Cornell students I better see 100 at orientation, I better see 100 business cards. And so imagine one business card a week, one important conversation with somebody a week. Just start, okay? Just start. And the more you start, the bigger and bigger your network will grow. Also part of networking is I want you to become really good. I want you to have a series of good questions to ask, because I want you to ask questions that aren't simply answered yes or no. And I want you to also be able to talk and really have some really important things to say about yourself, because part of networking is to find people that are like you, and the only way you're going to do that is to share something about yourself and learn something about them. Should you ever be asked a question by like this when you meet somebody, what is your genius? Please do not come up with the answer like this, what is genius, or I never thought about that, okay? But because all of you have something incredibly special to offer, and all of you know what that is, okay? And just be comfortable talking about that, and think a little bit about that, so that when you're asked that, because you're going to be asked that in some way, shape, or form, be prepared to answer that. Where are the jobs? Well, I told the group earlier that one of my most favorite real estate entrepreneurs is Trammell Crow. And Trammell Crow had one place to put every master's student when they showed up at Trammell Crow, and most of them were destined, if they made it with Trammell Crow for a while, to become on partner, and most partners in the Trammell Crow company went on to become millionaires. And Trammell Crow put everybody to work in leasing. And in part, he put them to work in leasing because they had to learn to network well, they had to learn to communicate well, to listen well, and they had to learn to make a connection with the customer and learn more about their needs. If you're going to be really great in real estate, the person that you're doing great real estate for is that tenant. And you've got to get some experience about what those tenants want to do in life, and you've got to develop your selling skills. And I explained to the group a little while ago, I said, imagine just about everybody after this crisis has some sort of real estate project that needs 10,000 feet at least filled. And if you filled 10,000 feet, you would generate 300,000 in revenues. And 300,000 in revenues would go right to the bottom line, and 300,000 more of profit in a real estate project is worth about $5 million. So you'd be the $5 million idea person, okay? And filling 10,000 feet would be convincing just 2, 3, or 4 businesses to come into that project. So if somebody called me up and said, Duane, I see you've got this project in Orlando or in Tampa, and you got 10,000 feet you need to fill, and I got a half dozen or a dozen ideas that can go there, I got a pretty good idea you're going to get a job. And there isn't any shortage of people out there in the real estate industry that have actually solved that. So you're going to have an awful lot of people that you're going to be able to call. But you're also going to find that the investors are coming back into real estate. The stock market hasn't been performing well for institutions. The bond market is now yielding just 2.5% for the 10-year bond. Commodities haven't provided that great of returns. And real estate, endowments, pension funds, institutional investors need to earn around 7 or 8% in order to meet the obligations that they have. And they're going to, real estate stigma is lifting quickly, and those investors are going to come in. And so we're not going to build many new projects over the next 2 or 3 years. So don't try to jump out there and be part of new construction, because there's not going to be many jobs there, but there's going to be a lot of jobs associated with running the projects that are there well. Filling space is going to be an important area. And there's also going to be a lot of jobs associated with these investors, these institutions, going out and buying additional projects. So investment sales, there's going to be need for analysts there, and institutions are going to need more analysts and acquisitions assistants. So the people that we just hired, 2 of them, master students, came into leasing. I told you Enrique came into a whole new science, marketing, growing tenant sales. And the 4th person, Josh Ladle, came from Cornell's program, and he's helping with acquisitions, which is just calling every owner there is and getting to build a relationship. So you will find a much more robust job market 12 months from now than there was for the last class, and it will continue to get stronger and stronger over the next several years. And so remember, nobody's going to penalize you in life for where your first job was after this program. Okay? So get out there and make your next job decision not how much you're getting paid, but how much opportunity you have to learn. Pursue the job, your next job, on that basis, because ultimately, the more you learn, this is not a sprint, this is a marathon. And your next phase in business is to learn more and not to become Sergey Brin and Larry Page and $1 billion out of the box. So data, I touched on it briefly. I kind of hate all the data sources you can buy from, even though I use them all. CoStar, we buy from Bloomberg and others all kinds of CMBS data. There is data on various firms looking to invest in real estate funds. I mean, there's all kinds of data that we subscribe to. And I'm not the expert on everything that Woolbright subscribes to, but I'm happy to put you in touch with Liz Hoyer, who's in charge of our research, to talk more about that. We collect information on the sales, yes, from CoStar, but then we call all the active brokers. We track all the transactions that we hear about anecdotally. We collaborate with a lot of people in the industry to make sure we've captured the universe of transactions that have occurred. And as I said, we drive up and down every street. That's how we figure out where the proposed projects are, where the projects that are under construction are, how the existing centers are performing. There is an entire regiment of data collection, field data collection. We descend in teams of 5 or 6, two-person teams. We have special software written for collecting data when we visit shopping centers in these field data days. There's about one a month typically. In our data collection, there's one driver, one typer, which is good because there used to just be one person. We had one car flip as a result of that. That didn't work very good. We wrote special software for the data collection so we could verify the data as we were in the field. So if somebody was visiting a 100,000-foot project, they weren't reporting there was 1 million feet empty, the computer was yelling at them in that event. We built data entry systems that immediately synced with the mainframe when we were back in the office, so there was no read data inputting. The inputting was being done in the field. We used to use paper forms and then have somebody type them in. That was horrible because you lost a lot of the observations, and we leave a lot of room to make notes as you're out in the field. And so data collection, doing your homework means you're going to drive around a lot, you're going to make an awful lot of notes, and you're going to collect a lot of data, and you're going to have to learn to organize it really well. How do you find capital? So if you, really easy search to do on Google is the 50 largest investors in real estate in the U.S. There's a pretty good list that comes back. I'm happy to send it to you. You can email me. Get to know as many. I always start with the top 10 because you can pretty much fill every idea you ever have with the top 10 guys because they have many trillions of dollars, and you can't run out as long as you connect with those guys. Everybody's looking to invest in a great idea. To start out, you always have friends and family. It seemed as though all my friends and family were broke when I started out, so that never seemed to work very well. So I tended to figure out who were people that were buying things already and make a connection with them. I'm not afraid to stand up and pitch my ideas to somebody, and nor should you be. So, capital will never be a constraint for you if you have a great real estate idea or any kind of idea. Just get on the phone, start contacting people that you know have the capital, and set up a meeting, because don't use email, okay? 60% of communication is nonverbal. So email is going to be a horrific way to communicate. You don't know how many times I send out this missive to everybody, stop sending emails for important communications. At the very least, pick up the phone. But if you're going to go out and raise capital, you're not going to do it by emails. You better do it by just this persistent phone call. If your email should say, "When can I call you?" Okay, that's the most you're allowed to do in the email. You must speak to them by phone, and you absolutely have to get an appointment. All right? Now, it's going to get easier once you develop a track record, because then they're going to have heard about you, and that's going to be easier than when they haven't heard about you. But really, that didn't slow down too many people in life on getting their first project done, because everybody needs to do a first project, and the only way you're going to find capital to do your first project is not going to be based on your track record. It's going to be based on your networking skills. And how do you start? A book I recently read about procrastination by Fiore talked a little bit about, first of all, recognizing that whatever you're going to do, you have to say you choose to do it. I don't need to do this. I choose to do this. That choice of words right off the bat will change the way you approach something. You want to diet? I don't need to lose weight. I choose to lose weight. Okay? You want to do a great real estate project? I don't need to do this great real estate. I choose to do this project. Just first of all, start with that. Secondly, Fiore talks about that you simply, these projects are going to be very long, and you do not need to think about this really long project and getting it done, but he wants you to just simply start. Okay? So I've gotten much better over the summer. I started to make these lists, and I had a whole series of things, tasks that I wanted to get done, and I would pick some group of them that I was going to work on that day. Many studies have been done that people that work on their 6 highest priorities only, I think that was from Carnegie, but others, were something like 50% more productive than people that haphazardly worked on things. So you might have a list of 20 priorities, concentrate on working on your top 6, forget about the others for a while, and of those 6, make sure that you spend some time on them each day. So I don't care if you spend 15 minutes, I don't care if you spend 30 minutes, then get up and go and eat an apple or watch, do something, play a hand of solitaire on your iPhone or something, and then get back down and start the next thing. But keep doing it. You start, when I wanted to write that software program when I was 23 and spent 6 weeks in my pajamas writing an accounting system, I just closed the door and started coding. By the time I got done with the code, I could stretch it from here to the back of the room, right? But it is just wake up and choose to do it. There is no way, no one path to start in the real estate industry. Okay, now I stump myself, because this isn't even a word in English, DELVR. The leverage system, right. Great, that's good. Yeah. Whew. Okay. So look, there's $20 trillion worth of houses in the United States. There's $11 trillion worth of mortgages on them. 1/3 of all the houses in the United States don't have a mortgage. Okay. There's probably some number like 1/3 of commercial properties don't have any debt. And we have probably $5 or $6 trillion worth of commercial real estate, and we have $3.5 trillion worth of debt. There is going to be a large number of problems associated with properties when their loans come due, because the days of putting 80% of the value, days of lenders willing to put 80% of the value onto properties is gone forever, or gone for an awful long time, until the next mania takes hold at least. And so, nevertheless, there is $11 trillion on deposit in money market accounts, bonds, and various other, essentially cash accounts in the United States. And so, in a country that has $11 trillion of cash, it's not too terribly hard to deal with reducing the $3.5 trillion of commercial real estate debt, say, down to $2.5 trillion. Okay? Now, there's going to have to essentially get new capital. Somebody has to sell their treasury bills or liquidate some of their money market account and buy a piece of real estate that's worth $30 million that currently has a $25 million loan on it. And they're going to have to buy that piece of real estate, and they're only going to get a $20 million loan. They're going to have to show up with $10 million in cash. But the good thing that's going to help the system delever, and it's going to delever, is that the investors are going to earn 7 or 8%, on the cash that they're bringing into the project. So, and that's very good in a world where the 10-year bond is only paying 2.5%. What's happening now in the real estate business is that the occupancy levels are stabilizing, and the rental reductions are going to soon stabilize. And so the income streams, which fell probably to 90%, by 10%, the average person probably lost about 10% of their income stream. Some due to declining rents, some due to higher vacancies, because we didn't overbuild the commercial market in this crisis. We overbuilt the housing market. And so there will be a very orderly restructuring, deleveraging of this debt. Very different than in 1993 when there was a mass liquidation where the government, closed hundreds of banks, put all the properties into the Resolution Trust Corporation, and had these big bulk sales. So this will be a very orderly process. It will create a number of opportunities. So there will be a guy that owns a shopping center who never intended to sell it, who loans comes due, and who can't seem to raise that extra $5 million, who's still going to get a check for $5 million, okay? But he's going to likely, give the opportunity to somebody else to own that property and take it forward. So I hope, if you want to touch a little bit more on deleveraging, happy to cover it. I think we pretty much used up all of our time, haven't we? Yeah, killed that. Bradley, you guys didn't signal me very well, and I didn't come over here, and I needed to speed up. So thank you all for giving me the opportunity to visit with you today.